and welcome to episode 3 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I'm Cam Kane.
I'm Sahil Shah.
And we have a very special episode today. It's the Trade Extravaganza.
Yeah, 20 trades have been made since the end of the season, and we are going to discuss all 20 of those trades today. Now, 105 players and picks have been moved in a 2-week span, believe it or not. So this is going to be a really fun episode, and Cam and I are really excited to talk about these trades.
We're talking only trades this episode. If it's not a trade, we do not want to hear it. Sorry, Garrett Crochet. And yeah, we've also got a couple big special guests on today to talk about their trades. We've got Erik McKeen, league commissioner. He was on last week to talk about the awards, but he's got a big deal of his own to talk about, the Julio Rodriguez, Jose Ramirez deal. And then we've also got Alex Fischer, owner of Hakuna Matata without Acuna, to talk about his perspective in that deal.
Yep. So do you want to dive right in, Cam? Let's start we're going to start talking about some of the bigger trades that have happened and then kind of work our way down after that. But the very first trade that we're going to talk about is the Julio Rodriguez deal, where Erik traded Julio Rodriguez, J.D. Davis, Justice Sheffield, and Sam Delaplane to Alex for Jose Ramirez and Yuki's 2021 first-round pick. So what are your thoughts on that trade, Cam?
Yeah, we can kind of go quickly over this one since we've got two separate guests talking about it. Yeah. But I think this is the first trade of Erik's in a while that I really like for him. I think as much as I like Julio Rodriguez, Jose Ramirez is a superstar, and he's getting a high first-round pick back in the deal as well, in addition to Jose Ramirez. I think that could possibly be the two best pieces, both going the same direction, and that's what they said about my infamous Lindor deal. So
yeah, I agree that I think Erik probably wins the trade. I think that, if you're going to trade a stud like Jose Ramirez, getting a consensus top 5 to 10 prospect like Julio Rodriguez is the exact type of return that you should be looking for. I think that J.D. Davis is a bit underrated. I love the OBP numbers, especially in an OBP league. He's like a 370 OBP each of the past 2 years. I think he could hit for 25 to 30 home runs. I think he's a solid replacement for Ramirez at third base. I think Sheffield, I've historically been low on him, but the numbers have actually looked pretty solid this year. And I feel like what Alex has been doing, or at least he was trying to do, I think that some of these later trades might contradict that, is stockpiling some of these young starting pitchers to see, how they pan out. And I think Sheffield's not a bad guy to gamble on. And Delaplane, I think, could be a solid reliever. He's a good fourth piece in this deal. That being said, I agree with Cam. Giving up Ramirez, an absolute stud, is always hard to do, and that's something that, I generally like to do, especially, he's still pretty young. And then I think giving up the first-round pick was unnecessary. I think I would have liked this deal more for Alex without the pick, but I still think I'm leaning Erik on this deal. We want to go into the next trade, Cam?
Yeah, we can talk in a little more depth about the other big ones. That was the deal where EBO sent Kenta Maeda and utility player David Fletcher to Yuki's team in exchange for Starling Marte and DJ LeMahieu. What did you think about that one?
Yeah, so LeMahieu has just been killing it the past 2 years, and I wonder if him becoming a free agent, maybe if he goes somewhere other than Yankee Stadium and being in that lineup, maybe depresses his value a bit. But he's still 32. He's got multi-position eligibility. I expect him to have at least like 2-3-ish more very good years. I think he's unlocked something in his game the past couple of years that he just didn't have in Colorado. Starling Marte, I know he started off hot in Arizona. He cooled down a bit in Miami. I still think he's a very solid outfielder. I think the speed is going to start declining a bit. So I think that he's past his peak value, but I still think he's a solid bat for EBO. I think Maeda is someone I've always really liked, and I was really glad when he got traded to Minnesota last year because, or for this season, because I felt like they would actually give him the opportunity to just stick in the rotation. and he responded with a very solid year. But he's also a little bit on the older side, and I don't think that maybe he has quite the upside of some of these younger aces, and I don't think he's going to put up a performance like he did this year. And Fletcher, I really like. The multi-position eligibility is obviously great. I think he's like 26. He's very young. So I think that he could be a long-term piece in the Moneyball offense. But while he hits for a solid OBP, there's just not a lot of home runs or stolen bases or any of those counting stats. He almost reminds me of a poor man's like Colorado version of DJ LeMahieu. So ultimately, I think for what EBO wanted to accomplish, I think that they win this deal. But I'd be curious to see if, Fletcher can maybe develop a bit more and become a bit more of a force. Because I think if he does, then, maybe Yuki wins this trade.
Yeah, I think this is a trade I like really well for both sides. Yeah. Kenta Maeda, that deal really signified the new era of the executive batting order. This was the first kind of open the floodgates for them, trading away Scherzer and trading away Julio Urias and trading away Chris Sale and just getting rid of all of their starting pitchers. This was the one that kind of set that into motion. And I think Maeda is a very good pitcher, and he'll fit really well into Yuki's team because he's kind of very much in need of a guy like that. He does have Kershaw, but excluding Maeda, his second best starting pitcher is Dallas Keuchel.
Yeah, and he had a solid year, but I don't think he's the type of guy you're counting on.
Yeah, exactly. And LeMahieu had a phenomenal season, but who knows? Yeah, who knows what he's going to look like next year? He's really not a guy I have the most confidence in but I think the EBO getting LeMahieu and Marte, that is a solid return for a guy like Maeda and basically what you could expect.
Do we want to move on to the EBO's next trade here?
This one's a doozy.
Yeah, this is a doozy. I've gone back and forth on this one. So EBO sent Max Scherzer, Casey Mize, Riley Green, Julio Urias, and prospect Heriberto Hernandez to Alex for Max Fried, Sixto Sanchez, Luke Voigt, Monte Harrison, and Jarren Duran. You want to weigh in first here, Cam?
Oh, this is a tough one because I was in talks for Fried and Voigt at the same time while this was going on, and this was the first of 2 times in a row that Fried was kind of traded under my nose while I was close to a deal for him. So that kind of bugs me a bit. God, I don't know. I think Alex did really well in this trade. If you're going to trade away 2 centerpieces like Max Fried and Sixto Sanchez, he got a really solid return for them. Scherzer wasn't quite what he has been, but Casey Mize could be a future ace. Riley Green could be a future star. Seems Alex is I'm not sure if he's leaning into the future value aspect because at the same time he's trading away Sixto Sanchez.
Right.
Overall, I think the prospect return is fairly even. Riley Green is the best prospect going in the deal. Heriberto Hernandez is a guy I'm very interested to see if he moved because he's not a prospect, but he hit better in the minors in 2019 than any player in baseball in rookie ball.
Yeah.
So definitely makes sense why Alex would give him a shot. And Monte Harrison's kind of been nothing for the Marlins. We'll see what he turns into.
Yeah. So I think I'm a little more leaning towards EBO in this trade. I'll explain why. I think Scherzer's been great. Don't get me wrong, but he's 36 now. And like you're saying, he's coming off his worst season. Now, granted, Scherzer's worst season is still a season that most starting pitchers would love to have. But I think that we're going to see some decline there soon. And I think that he's not really someone I'd want to take on in the centerpiece of the deal. Now, I love the acquisitions of Mize and Green. I think that Mize versus Sixto, I think, is hard. I think Sixto obviously came on this year and did very well. And Pedro Martinez, came out and said, Sixto Sanchez, reminds me of me, which is very high praise. But he's never had that high of a strikeout rate. He's more of a control guy. And I don't know if the upside is quite there. I don't know if he's ever going to be a Garrett Cole, like a top 5 fantasy starter. I think he might be more of a top 20 starter, which is not to say he's not useful or great for fantasy, but I don't think he maybe has quite the upside that maybe Mize could have. So I think that's tricky. I think Riley Green is a very solid prospect. I think he could be a very solid outfield bat for years to come. And, I think Julio Urias, I think the one thing that really trips me up with him is that he just doesn't pitch deep into the games. And the Dodgers have been bouncing him around between the bullpen and the rotation a lot. So while I think he's a solid starting pitcher, I'm just not sure he's someone I can really rely on. Hernandez, Harrison, and Duran are, I think, just kind of throw-ins to this deal. I don't think they're super relevant. I think Luke Voigt is a very interesting and underrated part of this deal. I mean, he had a fantastic year this year in the shortened season, was very solid last year, and then when he came over in 2018 with the Yankees. So I think that, he's a good fit for the EVO offense, especially given their need for a first baseman. And I'd say that Max Fried is probably the best starting pitcher in this deal. I mean, I think he's young.
Absolutely.
I think he's made some changes in kind of his pitch mix, with the slider and the curveball, where I think that, he's really it has shown why he's taken off the past couple of years. I think he gets a lot of soft contact. I wish he'd go a little deeper into games, but I think that he's an ace. And I think that he's probably a top 10 to 15 dynasty starting pitcher. I know that some people like you have him ranked a little higher, but I think top
just
10
a little
to 15
higher
is where I put him. So I think overall this trade's probably a win for EBO. I think had the piece going to Alex been a younger starting pitcher than Scherzer, or maybe Scherzer was like 4 or 5 years younger, maybe I'm having different analysis here, but I think EBO wins. But that being said, I don't think either team crushes the other in the deal. I think it's still relatively even, and there's a lot of variability depending on how Mize, Green, Sixto, and the other prospects and Urias pan out.
Right. Yeah, I didn't even really talk much about Luke Voigt because there's just so much to unpack here. But EBO has really been revamping their offense over the past couple of weeks, and it might be the best in the league now. Who knows?
It might be. I mean, Betts, Tatis, Turner. I know they made some more trades for bats later on. We'll get into that. Actually, this next trade has a couple bats they just acquired. This one involving me for once. I traded Greinke, Eddie Rosario, Michael Brantley, and Nelson Cruz to EBO for Max Fried, JD Martinez, Corbin Martin, Luis Matos, Andrews' 2022 second-round pick, and EBO's 2023 second-round pick. You want me to start with my thoughts here, Cam?
Yeah, it's your trade. Go for it.
Yeah, so I went into this offseason not expecting that I'd be able to get good value for Greinke and Cruz based on their ages, and to a lesser extent Brantley. Cruz is 40, Greinke's going to be 37 next year. Brantley's going to be 33 to start the year. And I was really disappointed to lose out on Max Fried. Initially, he was one of the guys that I was really targeting from the beginning of the offseason. I was actually targeting him last offseason when Connor had him. So I'm very thankful that I got him. And, I just, while I hated giving up 3 bats, especially 3 bats that really contributed to my championship team and have been so consistent, I thought getting the 26-year-old ace was worth it. I mean, they're not. I feel like young, great starting pitching is the most valuable asset in this league. It's the hardest to get. So when the opportunities arise to get them, you don't you don't skip on them. You go and get them. And I think getting JD Martinez kind of helped me feel a bit better about this exodus of bats that I had. I thought Corbin Martin was an interesting prospect. I know he's been hurt, but I know there's been some hype around him, so I thought I'd take a gamble on him. Matos is someone that Fangraphs is pretty decently high on. I think maybe he could potentially crack a top 100 list next year. Andrews' 2022 second-round pick I thought would be near the top of the round and would be a good trade asset, which was, as we'll see, I did end up trading away a few days later. And same with EBO's 2023 second-round pick. So overall, I like that I got the best player in this trade. And I've liked what I've been able to do with some of the other pieces that I acquired. And interestingly enough, I'll throw out a couple tidbits. Greinke and Rosario have already been traded back to me. Now, I traded Greinke away again, but so 2 of the 4 players that EVO sent me have already found their way back on my roster.
You've been busy.
Yeah, I traded EVO's 2023 second-round pick back to them. 6 of the 10 players and picks involved in this trade have already been traded away. So Greinke and Rosario on EVO's end, and then Martinez, Martin, and those second-round picks on my end. So definitely a fun trade. I know that you were disappointed to not get freed, and maybe if you want to talk about your negotiations with EVO before this trade went down as well, I'd be interested to kind of hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we were all very surprised to see Freed on the move so quickly, especially me, since I thought I was making a little bit of progress for him. We were talking about a few different players. Darvish was kind of going to be the centerpiece, going back to Zane and Max, with maybe Jake Diekman going back to them as well, maybe Nick Senzel. But yeah, I was confident in a deal working out there. It didn't end up happening. But I think, Freed is a phenomenal get for you. And JD Martinez, he had a not so great year this year, but I think interesting guy to buy a little low on. And both of those second-round picks ended up getting moved.
And I do agree with your point on JD Martinez. I think that he is due for a bounce back, but also he's going to be 33. He's util only. And I think he's past his prime. And I think maybe he'll post some more like 120, 130 WRC plus seasons. But I don't know if that's someone I really want to count on long term. You want to move on to this next deal?
Yeah, sure. One quick thing. Would you say it's safe to say that Matos is your number 1 prospect now after the move, after the more recent moves? It's kind of, it's even slimmer than ever now in your farm system.
Yeah, I will. My farm system is a hot mess. It's usually a hot mess, but it's not looking great now. I'd say probably Matos is my top prospect there. That being said, there are a couple other interesting guys, that I really like. I'll just highlight one quickly. Alejandro Kirk has traditionally slugged in the minor leagues. I know the catcher defense isn't that great. But he came on really strong at the end of this year, and I could see him supplanting Danny Jansen there for the catcher role in Toronto. So
yeah, he looked phenomenal.
He did. Okay, this next trade. Yeah, Erik traded Marcell Ozuna, Kyle Seager, Drew Pomeranz, and Keegan Aiken to EVO, yet again EVO, for Sixto Sanchez, Whit Merrifield, Mike Yastrzemski, and Frankie Montas.
Yeah, that's just a nut. EBO trading away more guys yet again, more of their pitchers. It's another interesting one. I think my gut says EBO won the trade pretty clearly. They got two phenomenal bats. Kyle Seager kind of had a surprisingly great year this year. Marcell Ozuna, of course, could be top 3 in our MVP voting, certainly one of the top outfielders. He was one of the best hitters in baseball this year. And then Drew Pomeranz, stud reliever at the back end of that Padres bullpen. He lived up to expectations. Keegan Aiken's a nothing. They've already cut him. But overall, I think for the price they gave up, I know Mike Yastrzemski, a lot of people are high on him. I'm not. I'd like to see a longer track record. Whit Merrifield is very much an Erik player. I wouldn't be surprised if you told me this was his 4th separate stint on Erik's team.
This is at least his 2nd stint.
Yeah. And Sixto Sanchez we've talked about earlier, but I would just like to say that with all of the hype around him this year, I bought a little too much into it before looking at the numbers and realizing he was fine, especially for a 21, 22-year-old, but he wasn't anything groundbreaking this year.
Now, 3.46 ERA, I believe, and like a 4.10 FIP, something around that range. And, I think that he's going to be solid. But like I said, I think that just like without maybe a higher strikeout rate, he's going to inevitably just be a little bit limited fantasy-wise in terms of his upside. I think this trade is a bit closer to even than maybe you think. Marcell Ozuna had a great year. I'm not going to take anything away from that. A 179 WRC plus is fantastic. 431 OBP, 18 homers, 56 ribbies. That's great. But there's a couple things that I didn't like this year. One, he had a 391 BABIP. There's no way that number is sustainable. He had no stolen bases this year in 60 games after having a career-high 12 stolen bases last year. And that's a little worrisome because not that the speed is a huge part of his game or a huge part of his value, but that's definitely nice. The 2 seasons prior to this one, he had a 109 WRC plus and a 107 WRC plus, finishing with OBPs below 330. So while I think he could be solid, and he's now going to be, he'll start next year at the age of 30. So while he could still be a solid player, I don't necessarily think that he's like going to be a consistent MVP candidate moving forward. It's a 60-game season. He easily, over the next 100 games, could have slumped a bit, and those numbers would have looked very solid, but maybe not at the level that they were. Kyle Seager, again, very solid season, but just doesn't have a lot of upside. I think he's kind of a replaceable player. Pomerantz is someone that I really like. I think that he's going to keep it up. He had a fantastic season. I think that Sixto Sanchez, when in doubt, I'd rather gamble on the 22-year-old young starting pitcher who's already shown some solid signs. Like I said, I think he could be a top 20 starter in this in a dynasty league. I think Witt is roughly the same age as Ozuna, and he just has a better track record of consistent success. I think Yastrzemski, I agree with you. I want to see more. I don't fully buy in. I think that he has made some changes that I think could be sustainable and he could be a productive regular. But I don't think we're talking about him as like a top 30 outfielder moving forward, or maybe not even, top 40. I think he might be in that 30 to 40 range, but hard to tell. And Montas, I thought, was an interesting buy low because he was good in 2019 before the suspension. And I think he showed some signs this year of improvement as the season went on. I think he's an interesting gamble for Erik. So I might actually like this trade a little better for Erik.
Interesting. You're a lot higher on Whit Merrifield than I am.
I think Whit Merrifield, how old is he now? I want to search this up quickly.
He's 31.
He's 31. Okay, so he'll start the season at 32, so he'll be 2 years older than Ozuna.
He's got the steals, but he also had a 325 on base percentage this year.
That's true. He did score 105 runs last year. That's a lot. And had 20 stolen bases. He did have 12 stolen bases this year and 9 home runs in 60 games. If he could post a couple more 2020 seasons and score close to 100 runs atop that lineup, I'm not saying he's the type of guy I really want to gamble on long term, but like these numbers look right. The OBP numbers look the past 2 years were better than Ozuna's OBP numbers the last 2 years. And his OBP numbers this year were right in line with Ozuna's numbers. And
yeah, I'm not sure 105 runs is something he can continue to do, especially as he gets slower. And mostly just because that 105 runs relied heavily on Jorge Soler hitting 50 home runs in 2019. He's certainly not going to do that again, in my opinion.
That's a fair point. I like Ozuna. I think he has a good skill set. I'm just not ready to buy in after 60 games, after his prior 2 seasons. He's had one great season before this one. And even that was also partially BABIP fueled. So I want to see a longer track record for Ozuna before I declare that it's a win for EBL. And that being said, I think Sixto closes the gap between Ozuna and Witt and then some. So,
all right. Well, let's move on to the next trade. Another example of Zane and Max trading away a big starting pitcher. This time they sent Chris Sale and Jesus Luzardo, as well as Ronnie Mauricio and a second rounder, to Andrew in exchange for Yordan Alvarez, Sean Murphy, a first rounder that'll be the number 9 pick this year, as well as a second rounder this year. Yeah, what do you think of this one?
This is tricky. I get Andrew's general strategy of wanting to improve the rotation. And I think Luzardo accomplishes that. I don't know. I don't think Chris Sale, just not the type of player I think he needs to target. I think Andrew's in for a lengthy rebuild, and Sale's like a 30-year-old starting pitcher coming off of Tommy John. Maybe he could gamble that Sale is going to have more value, kind of after the recovery. Maybe he comes back, he has a good season. But I wonder if there's a different player he could have acquired instead of Sale. That being said, I really like the Luzardo pickup. I like Mauricio. Giving up your first rounder this year, I know it's lower in the round. I don't know if that was entirely necessary. I think Sean Murphy is a bit underrated at catcher. I think he could be a top 10 to 12-ish catcher in this league. Jordan's a big question here. We saw how good he could be his rookie year. I mean, I still regret trading him away for Greinke and Archer, and I know you sure regret trading him away for Blake Parker. But he had surgery in both his knees this year. He came back for a couple games and then landed right back on the DL, missed the entire season. If he can stay healthy, I think he's going to be a very productive player, and this trade could easily be a win for EBO. But that being said, like Luzardo looks like a young ace in the rising. Mauricio is one of the top prospects in baseball. I think this trade is pretty close to even. And I think that there's just a lot of risk on both sides with the Alvarez and Sale injury. So I think it's a little too early to determine what's going to happen. I'd be curious to hear this offseason how Alvarez and Sale are progressing before really giving a grade on this trade one way or another. But my gut says that this is kind of an even-ish deal. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I'd say probably pretty even, maybe. I don't even know who I'd give the edge to. It really depends on what happens with Chris Sale. And Andrew, it's a very interesting choice for him to go after Chris Sale, with his team being, like you said, in the very long rebuilding phase. But maybe, on the other hand, who else wants Chris Sale at this point? He may be broken forever. So it's a definite gamble. I know when my team was rebuilding, I would pick up guys just on waivers and gamble on them, hoping they would turn into what Trent Grisham turned into for me. So maybe Chris Sale is kind of the same, in a kind of similar strategy, in that he's buying low on a guy, although in his case he would probably flip him for someone else. So if Andrew, within the next 12 months, can trade Chris Sale for a young star or prospect, I think that could certainly tip the scales in his favor. Sean Murphy is a future star, but Andrew is more confident in Will Smith, and I don't really blame him.
Yeah,
he has his guy already, and yeah, I guess it depends. He did give up my 2021 first round pick, but the reason I don't have that pick is because I'm not confident in this draft. So it'd be a little hypocritical for me to say that pick is a big deal.
Yeah, no, definitely. Any more thoughts, or do you want to move on to our last big trade?
Yeah, this is another one of yours. Let's move on.
Yeah, so yesterday I traded Greinke, JD Martinez, Orelvis Martinez, Robert Poisson, and Andrew's 2022 second-round pick to Clayton and Jake, my first trade with Clayton and Jake ever, for George Springer, Max Muncy, starting pitcher prospect Johan Oviedo, and Acuna, but not the good one, Luis Angel Acuna, still a decent prospect. Why don't we talk about the lead up to this trade? Because I think this is one of the most interesting kind of trade negotiations that has just happened in this league.
Yeah, let's go for it. I'll ask for it. I got an anonymous tip that you were about to rip someone off, and it turned into this trade. And I wouldn't say it was a ripoff in the slightest.
Well, it was I think it was more unfair in its original iteration. I did have to add Poisson in the second round pick in to kind of close the deal. I think Jake was on board before those acquisitions. I think he's a Red Sox fan, right? So I think he's a little higher on JD bouncing back, and Clayton wasn't. I know they asked for Mancini, and I countered with Poisson in the second, and ultimately we were able to close because of that. So I think going for a trade that I felt more like I definitively won to a trade that I'm still feeling very good about, but not like a slam dunk. But there was a real possibility this whole trade would not have happened. So after I traded all those bats to EBO for Max Fried, he gave me Zach Greinke back. And I talked to him about shipping Greinke, some prospects, and some picks back to him for a bat. So we kind of agreed to it in principle. I believe it was like Greinke, Marcell Ozuna, a couple picks, and there might have been something else involved, and I'd be getting Michael Brantley back. And eventually he was like, look, this is going to be part of a 3-team trade with Yuki, where Yuki would be the one who's getting Greinke, EBO would be getting Kenley Jansen, I would be getting Brantley, and there'd be some other, prospects involved in picks. So there are a couple of – this all started about a week ago. And then there are a couple of issues that popped up during that time. One, EBO was supposed to send Yuki a relief pitcher in the deal, and they had some issues over determining who the relief pitcher would be. I know Yuki wanted Presley, and Zane kind of gave him a list of 3 relievers that he would have been willing to deal. I think ultimately it was going to be announced as a player to be named later, but possibly Melanson. Additionally, reports came out literally an hour after I reacquired Greinke, which really pissed me off, that he was dealing with an arm injury. So the deal got put on hold until after Greinke, pitched in Game 4 and proved that he was healthy. So after that, I'm really pushing to get a deal done, but we're still trying to figure out what's going to go on with the reliever that Yuki was going to get from EBO. EBO also expressed a little bit of hesitation about giving up Jansen or acquiring Jansen after he had a bad game against the Padres. But it looked like things were going to come together after I said, hey, I closed the gap by adding Corbin Martin. I was good for it at the moment. As things were progressing, I was a little more unsure. So Friday night, I chat Clayton and Jake with an offer of JD and Greinke for Springer and Muncy. We had previously discussed deals centered around JD, Springer, and Muncy, but they wanted a second bat for me, and I didn't really want to do a 2-for-2 bat deal because I thought at best I was breaking even, and I liked the guys that I had. But I thought including Greinke instead of the second bat made this a little better for me. So that morning, Saturday morning, we're about ready to close on the 3-team deal, but I was a little hesitant because now that I was including Corbin Martin, I wanted a pick in return from Yuki or a prospect. So we were haggling over to pick. It literally came down to a 3rd-round pick. And I was waiting to – and actually Yuki said that he'd send a 3rd-round pick, and then I went back to Zane trying to change one more thing. But we basically agreed to the framework. Right as we had agreed to the framework, and we're finally getting close to announcing this, Clayton and Jake get back to me and said they were really interested. Jake was on board, but Clayton needed a little more convincing. So as I said, I added Poisson and Andrews 2022 second. So ultimately, what would have been the second 3-team deal in league history fell apart. And I ended up getting Springer and Muncy instead of adding Michael Brantley as the bat. So that's a little backstory behind the trade. It was wild. One of the longest negotiations I've had, one of the most frustrating negotiations. I thought at multiple different points that Michael Brantley would be on my team right now, but it didn't end up happening. Interestingly, though, a lot of the players and picks that I was going to trade, Zane and Zane and Yuki, I traded to them yesterday. So Gomber and Martin were supposed to go Yuki's way, and I traded them yesterday to him. And Zane and Max were supposed to get Urbina in that deal and some 2nd-round picks, and I ended up trading them to them this morning in the Eddie Rosario deal that we'll talk about in a little bit. So parts of the deal still happened, but the whole framework did not. So that's the story.
Awesome. Yeah, long, very, very long and wild, wild transaction. Took a long time to unfold. At one point, I even suggested, I asked if you had a deal brewing with them because I wanted to do a very minor 3-team deal just with all of the small deals involving draft picks that we'll talk about later. But little did I know there was a bigger 3-team deal brewing that very nearly happened.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. And I expect some more shenanigans like this over the offseason, and I'm hopeful that a 3-team deal can happen at some point this offseason, but it was crazy to see that one fall apart right at the finish line. But I want to talk about the merits of this trade a little bit. It seems like the consensus that I've heard just from talking to other people is that this trade is fairly even. I know some people have kind of come out and saying it's slightly in my favor. Some people saying it's slightly in Clayton and Jake's favor. I think my logic on my end was, look, Greinke is 37. He had the arm issue in the playoffs. I have 10 starting pitchers who are younger and that I like better, so I was ready to dump him. And JD Martinez is someone like I've talked about earlier. I think that there are things that he could correct to be better next year. I know he had some issues with his hips and how they were lining up. And I know that the lack of video has really hurt him in particular because he loves to go into the video room between his at-bats. And I know he's a hard worker. But 33 years old, probably only going to be util-only eligible for here on out. Or if he does gain outfield eligibility, it would take a while. So remove some flexibility. And I'm already gambling on a lot of players bouncing back. Chapman coming back from injury, Mancini, Altuve, Ketel Marte, Alonso, Meadows. I mean, the list goes on and on. So I wanted a bit more stability. I wanted to have more guys who had solid years this year that I felt like I could count on. And JD wasn't that guy. Orelvis and Poisson are both shortstop prospects that I really like. I think both of them could become studs. But we've seen a lot of these high variance kind of young prospects before, look really good and then just tank. I mean, remember Victor Mesa. There's some other names that I was talking about yesterday that I'm blanking on. But
Kevin Maitan.
Yeah, Kevin Maitan. Poisson has not played any professional baseball yet. And Orelvis has played, professional baseball 1 year, and they've lost a year of development. So I think that and realistically, they probably wouldn't help my team until 2024-ish, maybe at the earliest, 2025. So while I hated moving them, I thought they were my best 2 prospects. I was all right with moving on from them for a good return. And Andrew's 2022 second, I think that's going to be a lottery pick. I hate that I had to trade it, but as we'll see below, I've been acquiring so many second-round picks that I'm just like, fine, I'll find another second-round pick later. I think Springer, I love his game. He's been very consistent. I don't think the whole trash can scandal is the reason that he's been hitting well. He had a very good year this year. High character guy. I think that wherever he goes, he's going to be solid for another 3-4 years. He's only 31, so he's younger than JD. I think Muncy, I love Muncy's game. So the past 2, so I know this year batted under the Mendoza line, but his BABIP was about 80 points lower than the previous 2 years. But his walk rate and strikeout rate stayed the same. I think it's like a 14% walk rate. So despite the fact that he only hit 190, he had a 330 OBP, and the OBP is what matters in this league, not the average. And he had like 370, 380-ish OBPs the past 2 years while hitting 35 home runs each of those years. He's hitting near the top or the middle of a stacked Dodgers lineup. He's only 30. And, he has multiple position eligibility, first, second, and third. He's going to retain all those positions next year. And I know that was one thing I was really lacking when Altuve and Ketel Marte and Matt Chapman were all hurt for me all at once this year. Having to be like plugging guys like Joey Wendell and Chris Taylor because I just didn't have the depth in the infield. So I think having him as a backup in the middle infield and in the corner infield spots, especially with Chapman coming back from surgery and we're not exactly sure, if he'll be ready to start the season. It sounds like he will, but This gives me some insurance. I really like this trade. Definitely one of the trickier trades that I made, and I think definitely the closest deal that I made in terms of kind of the value that each side was giving up.
All right, yeah, certainly was. You want to move on to some of the medium-sized trades? We'll go a little quicker through those.
Yeah, let's do that. Andrew traded Josh Bell and Adbert Alzolay to Alex for Tristan McKenzie, Alex and Daniel's 2021 second, Alex's 2022 second, and reliever Will Smith, not the actor or the catcher.
So that Josh Bell, the first namesake to go since Ronald Acuna, I believe.
Yep.
I like this deal for Andrew a lot. Tristan McKenzie looked phenomenal this year in his debut. He got 2 more second rounders, which I think he's gonna want to be making a lot of picks coming up. And Josh Bell has just really not been good at all since the All-Star break. So the fact that he was able to not just get anything, but get a really great young starting pitcher for him, I think this is a huge win for him.
I agree. And the other thing we did mention about McKenzie is he pitches in Cleveland. Cleveland is a factory when it comes out to producing like great starting pitchers. And he had the great year this year. I think he's going to slot right in that rotation next year and do great for them. I think his prospect star has dimmed a little bit over the couple of years we've been in this league, but I still think he'll be a very solid starting pitcher. I agree to getting the picks is very good for him. Especially Alex and Daniel's pick is obviously a lottery pick. And maybe Alex and Zach's 2022 second will be a lottery pick. Will Smith is a decent throw-in. I think Alzolay could potentially become something, but I'm not as high on him as McKenzie. And Josh Bell, I know he came on strong at the end of this season. I know he slumped early. But I never thought that Josh Bell was like a top 5 first baseman. Like, I don't think he has that upside. I think he's a very replaceable corner infield bat. So I kind of questioned the decision to trade him away for McKenzie. I generally agree with the idea of having him as a buy low candidate, but I don't get the idea of giving up McKenzie for him. Want to move on to the next deal?
This one, EBO, another big move for them. They sent Byron Buxton, Jesus Aguilar, 2 second rounders, and a prospect, Ethan Hankins, to Connor for a first round pick, as well as Jake Fraley. This Eric's first round pick, I believe, is going to be
6th overall.
6th overall. Wow.
Yeah.
So a lottery pick and a Jake Fraley, who's kind of an interesting lottery ticket for just a bunch of stuff. What do you think about this?
I don't really get it from Connor's perspective. Buxton just hasn't been good. I think Buxton batted like 250 this year, but only had a 260 OBP. I know he had a little bit of like a hot streak there. He's in some home runs at the end of the season. He had a 1.5% walk rate this year. I don't see the appeal in him. Like, I know 2017 he had 16 homers, 29 stolen bases, and like maybe it looked like he was going to become something, but he just hasn't been able to consistently put it together. And at 27, you're starting to wonder if maybe, or he'll be 27 next year, you're starting to wonder if this is just who he is. Jesus Aguilar was a free agent pickup. Like, I know you had him in the semis. EBO picked him up for the finals. I think he's a decent player, but nothing special. Obviously, getting the second round picks are nice, but like, I'd rather have the first round pick. To give up a top 6 pick in the draft to get kind of this hodgepodge, I'm not sure. Again, maybe see something in Hankins, maybe Buxton puts it together, but I'd rather have the pick. And also, I think one thing I'll say about Fraley too is, I think maybe he could become a top 450-ish outfielder, someone who kind of hangs around, maybe on and off some rosters. So
maybe, but probably not with the Mariners since they have Kelenic and Julio Rodriguez coming up.
And Trammell and Mechanic are still there, yeah. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I think Ethan Hankins guy, he's in the Indians farm system, so that's a little bit of a boost, but he just walks so many guys, and those walk rates are only going to go up once he hits the majors. I just want to add, as a former Byron Buxton owner, you do not want to be a Byron Buxton owner. That man is just so frustrating.
Absolutely. I'd agree with that. Let's go to our last medium-sized trade here. This one involving me. I traded Kirby Yates, Giovanni Gallegos, Trevor Rosenthal, and EBO's 2023 second back to EBO for Greinke and their 2025 third-round pick, the first 2025 draft pick that was traded. I'll talk about this a bit from my perspective first. I think that relievers are very volatile from year to year. And I think that it's kind of easy to build a bullpen kind of on the fly. Gallegos was someone I picked up off of free agency before the season last year because I thought he could potentially take the closer's job or have a high leverage role in that bullpen. Rosenthal was someone that wasn't really on anyone's radar last year, and I got him in a cheap trade with Yuki. And ironically, like, Yates was probably my biggest reliever pickup last offseason, and he just ended up busting. So, you know, Yates coming off the bad year, and he's having the arm issues, getting a little older. Rosenthal, it's yet to be seen if he can keep this up. And I don't know, he's a free agent, so I don't know if he's signing somewhere where he's going to be a closer. And I think Hull's guys are pretty replaceable. And Gallegos, who knows what role he's going to have in a bullpen. He was closing there for a bit, and then they ended up, when he came back off the DL, got some holds. He hold actually in the finals matchup. And I think EBO's 2023 second-round pick is just going to be latent around, like, whatever, not really relevant. I think getting Greinke back was huge for me because I knew I'd be able to trade him for a bat. The intention was never to keep him. And obviously, again, the third-round pick was nice. And I just think that this kind of helped me accomplish the goals that I wanted to of acquiring another hitter without maybe having to give up one of my better starting pitchers or having to trade a hitter, So I like this from my perspective. But I also see why EBO likes it because they're trying to build this dominant bullpen. And I think, especially if Yates bounces back from the injury and Gallegos and Rosenthal keep it up, this will really help their bullpen be lethal.
So I don't really have anything interesting to say about this deal in particular, but I just think this would be a good time to tease that we do have Zane coming on again next week to talk about this deal and all of his other deals in which he's just trading away all of his starting pitchers. We talked a little bit to him about this last time, but then he went out and really just traded all of his starters away. So it'll be a fun conversation coming up.
Absolutely. He's made most of the major trades in this league so far, so I'd love to hear his perspective. So let's get into some of these smaller trades. I think we're just going to do these chronologically. I think the first one was Cole Calhoun. Yuki traded him to Erik for Ty France and Dean Kramer. Your thoughts, Cam?
I think that's, just a minor deal. Dean Kramer is a prospect in the Orioles system I think is interesting. Cole Calhoun I don't really think is worth a whole lot, so I think to get Dean Kramer for him is a solid acquisition.
Agreed. Calhoun was someone that Erik had dropped and Yuki had picked up, and I guess he finished a half-decent season, but I don't see the upside. Calhoun's about what he is right now. Also, I think Ty France is interesting. You got the multi-position eligibility there. He's someone who had a pretty decent year, and the Mariners are pretty thin in the infield, so maybe he gets some opportunities. I think that that's a trade that Yuki definitively wins. So the next trade is Erik traded Josh Stoutmount to Connor for Connor's 2021 second. Your thoughts?
I think solid pickup for Connor. I'm not really sure what Erik is doing trading away Stoutmount. He does have so many of those young relievers who could slide into closer or set up roles. Maybe he thought Stoutmount was kind of expendable, but I like him a lot. I think he's a very interesting guy to buy in on. I think he could possibly by the end of the year be the Royals closer, and Erik could really miss him next year.
I agree. And Erik doesn't have that many relievers on his roster right now. I think it's like 3 or 4 maybe. So, and I know that that's a big part of his strategy. I will say in Erik's defense, Stoutmount had a bit of a high walk rate. Obviously, the Royals aren't a great team. And one tidbit I think is interesting is Erik was asking only for a third-round pick for him, and then Connor kind of swooped in and gave him a pretty high 2021 second-round pick. I mean, Connor's pick is 16th overall. And because I think relievers are replaceable, I mean, I think this is roughly an even deal. But I think you're right. Maybe this drifts a little away from Erik's strategy, so not really sure here. But I think it's roughly even. So the next minor trade here is I traded Pete Fairbanks to Yuki for a player to be named later or cash considerations who ended up being Tucker Davidson. I guess I could briefly talk about this from my perspective. Fairbanks was someone I picked up after Yuki cut. I actually caught him at one point and then immediately picked him back up because I was like, oh, wait, I bet Yuki really wants him back. And sure enough, he did. We had actually talked for about a week about this and talked about various prospects. And finally, when I was making some of these other deals and wanted to clear space, I was like, just screw it. I'll take Tucker Davidson. I think Davidson might have some upside. Maybe could stick in that Braves rotation. I know he had a brief cup of coffee this year that didn't go well. But, you know, the Rays bullpen is just so unpredictable, and I don't think Fairbanks is one of the top guys there. I think, you know, guys like Anderson and Castillo are ahead of him on the depth chart, and who knows who else is going to pop up. So I was all right with making this deal. Also gives me some flexibility because I know Fairbanks is about to lose his prospect eligibility, and I anticipate kind of adding and dropping relievers quite a bit this year. So,
yeah, that's fair. I think Pete Fairbanks is pretty much nothing at this point. He's your standard middle reliever, is going to be added and dropped for people trying to stream a hold as much as Yuki likes him. And I think Tucker Davidson's not a prospect I'm especially high on, but I think he could fit nicely into your farm system.
Yeah, I view him more as trade bait, but we'll see. So the next trade was a player to be named later, which ended up being Adam Duvall, to Andrew for Alex and Zach's 2022 second. But I want to group this with the other series of trades I've made for second-round picks. So I traded Mike Minor to Cam for a 2023 second, Leody Taveras to Erik for a 2023 second. I traded Austin Gomber and Corbin Martin to Yuki for Ruthvik and Nick's 2022 second. And actually, a medium-sized deal that we forgot to talk about was this Eddie Rosario deal that just went down. I traded all four of those second-round picks that I acquired for guys that I had either just kind of were extra pieces in trades or guys that just picked up on free agency, turned those picks and a couple minor prospects into Eddie Rosario. And, you know, Eddie Rosario is a guy who I've really liked. Interestingly now, I acquired him in the 3-team deal the first season. I forget which one of you had him between you and Connor now. Then I traded him to Erik almost immediately for Jack Flaherty, Andrew Miller, and Kelvin Herrera. I also gave up Joaquin Soria in that deal. Then I got him back from Erik last year in a deal where I gave Tristan Casas in a first-round pick, traded him to EBO in the free deal, and now got him back from EBO. So moral of the story here is I can't quit Rosario, although he is good luck because he's been on a championship roster all 3 years. Solid home run RBI guy batting in the middle of that Twins lineup. He's just been pretty consistent. The OBP is not quite where you want it, but he's just someone I really like to have in my outfield rotation. I think that he's, you know, a very a solid bat there. And I also think there's some other interesting prospects in that deal. You know, I think that Urbina could potentially be someone who skyrockets up the rankings. Sherton Apostle got a cup of coffee this year with the Rangers, and I think that he could fit in their third base mix moving forward. I think Junior St. Quintin could be the same type of guy. Maybe he's like Luis Angel Acuna in the sense that he's kind of a dart throw young guy. I know Fangraphs has talked about maybe breaking a top 100 prospect list soon. Getting Ruth Vikendick's 2032 third round pick is always hilarious. And trading one of my clutch performers in the finals, Joey Wensleydale Wendell. I hate to see him go. I was actually looking to trade him, but I thank him for his service. And then he could maybe be someone that lasts on EVO's roster as kind of a bottom bat with some positional flexibility. So I wanted to make sure we didn't forget to talk about that trade that just went down today and kind of how that built up.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely interesting trade. Joey Wensleydale was a guy I picked up just because I was streaming bats against the Red Sox, and then suddenly I dropped him and didn't think anything of it, and then he became one of your big league yellow champs.
I gotta say, the only reason I picked him up was because you mentioned having picked him up, and you accidentally, your autocorrect when you were typing Wendell turned to Wensleydale. And after that, I knew that was just the type of guy I needed. So,
which doesn't make sense because I didn't know what Wensleydale was. I had never typed it before in my life. Why is autocorrect trying to say that? But
no clue. I mean, turns out it's a type of cheese. Like who knew? One of those crazy, just fun tidbits about the league. And Wendell played well for me down the stretch in the semis and the finals. So definitely a big part of both of those wins. But let's get to the last couple of minor trades here. Both of these involve you. We could group them together. You traded David Price to Clayton and Jake for a 2023 second-round pick. You just earlier today traded a 2021 third-round pick for Cole Winn. And also, I think we should talk about your decision to acquire Mike Minor for your 2023 second-round pick, because it basically looked like you swapped out David Price for Mike Minor, given that you gave up pretty much the same type of pick for them. So I was wondering if you could, talk about that a bit, your kind of thought process behind those moves to wrap things up here.
Yeah, so those two, the Mike Minor deal and the David Price deal, if you could, as you probably could guess, were a package. They were done with each other in mind. I saw Mike Minor was available. I know he wasn't the best this year, but I'm thinking maybe he's a guy I could stash in my roster, just in the pitching staff, and maybe make a couple decent starts for me. And then I also remembered, David Price is on my team, on my COVID list, but I figured, hey, I'd rather have Minor than Price. And I can also move up a couple of spots in the 2023 second round. Why not,
Absolutely. I think that it was a very solid move for you. I don't know which one I'd rather gamble on. I think I'd almost rather have Minor than Price, but I think that it's a bit of a toss-up. But I think you did very well there, getting a starting pitcher you liked better. And I enjoyed trading you a starting pitcher I just picked up off of free agency the week before. I thought the Cole Winn trade was very good for you, too. I think he's a pretty solid prospect, and for you to only give up a third-round pick for him, I think could be a steal down the road. Even if he doesn't crack your major league roster, I think you could eventually trade him for more than you acquired him for.
Yeah, that was just a nice little gift to me, I think. Andrew was giving up Cole Winn. He was a mid-second-round pick in the 2019 in our 2019 draft. I certainly value him. He's not someone I necessarily think is going to be a future ace, but I think he's a good prospect to have. Maybe he could develop into a solid starter, or maybe I can trade him away somewhere. And I think I certainly value him a lot higher than whoever I'd be picking with the 33rd pick. I don't even have the slightest clue who's going to be available there this year, at least. So I think getting a known commodity for an absolute unknown, whoever it's going to be is going to be worse than Cole Winn anyway.
Definitely. I don't have anything else to add. I think with that, we have discussed all 20 trades that have happened since the trade deadline and or since the season ended, and all 105 players, prospects, picks that have been dealt during that time. I'll ask you one more question before we wrap up here, Cam. Last night I counted that there were 55 trades made last season in between the end of the season and when the season started. Now, granted, we had a couple more weeks, or a couple more months rather, because COVID delayed the season. How many trades do you think that we are going to have overall this offseason, knowing that we have already had 20?
God, that's a good question. We had 55 last offseason, but it was pretty light for a while.
It really January and February, there was that month where I think 30-ish of the trades happened. So
it was a big month. Yeah,
I think that process is happening earlier this year.
I'd say it's going to definitely be over 55. I think we might push 75. We haven't even had the fall meetings or the winter meetings yet. There's going to be so many trades that no one's even thinking of right now. The groundwork will be laid at those. Yeah, I think we're certainly going to eclipse 55. And if I had to guess, I'd say 76.
I think that's a great guess. That's a big number. I mean, given that we've already had 20, I wouldn't put it behind us. We're definitely on pace to shatter 76. I'm gonna say 70 even. I put the over under at 60 yesterday, but the more I think about this, I think that we got more league activity than we've had in prior years, more competitive teams. I know that EBO and I have done a lot of our heavy lifting already, and I don't know if the two of our teams are necessarily going to drive activity per se. I know there's a lot of other teams out here gunning to make moves, and I know a third of the league still hasn't made a trade yet. I know Anthony hasn't. I know Ruthvik hasn't, and Alex and Daniel haven't. So, once they get into the mix, I think it's only going to make things more interesting. And yeah, 70 is the number I'm going to go with. We'll revisit these predictions at the end of the offseason and see how well they turned out.
All right. Yeah, hopefully we'll be proved wrong, and it'll be well over the century mark. But it's up to you all.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be really interesting to see. I hope we see some more trades. This has been very exciting. Every time I see someone make a big trade to make their team better, it makes me want to make a trade. So hopefully we see more of this.
We're going to take a quick break right now, but we'll be back with an interview with Erik to talk about his big trades from early in the offseason. All right, we're here now with League Commissioner Erik McKeen, but he's here today to talk not about his commissioner duties, but he's been pretty active in the trade market over the last couple of days, right, Erik?
Yeah, for sure. Got a lot of draft picks, and I got to get rid of some guys.
Yeah, so why don't we start out by talking about, I think, the big trade that was on everyone's mind here to start the offseason, the Jose Ramirez deal. If maybe you could go into the thought process behind that trade, maybe just kind of going into what led into those talks, just who initiated them. If you could give us some details about that.
Yeah, I think Alex initiated them. He was interested in Justice Sheffield, and I know I was probably looking to trade one or two starting pitchers, and him being one of them, just because I didn't think his exit velocity and stats to back it up were that great. Even though he had a pretty good rookie year. I don't know if he's still a rookie, but anyway, it was originally we were just throwing around Sheffield and Delaplane for Taylor Trammell, but then somehow, I don't remember how, it just got bigger and bigger. He's been trying to get Julio Rodriguez for a year now, I think, and he asked for him, and I said, I have to get someone pretty good back, and he said Ramirez would be available. And then things just kind of went from there. It became a huge trade.
Awesome. Yeah, you said he has asked a couple times about Julio Rodriguez. Are you willing to share any possible trades over the past few months that he has kind of proposed for Julio Rodriguez, or any other players that he has in the past offered for him?
Oh yeah, I think I've made a few big trades with Alex, and Julio's come up in pretty much every single one of them. Like I've tried to get Betts a few times. I've tried to get Ramirez in the past a few times actually, but nothing ever came to fruition. And then I knew I was lacking the star power, especially in terms of the hitting. So I was more willing to give up Julio now, and I just needed some steals also. So that's why I wanted Ramirez.
Do you have any regrets maybe about long term with, Julio potentially establishing himself as an elite option? He's a top 5 to 10, prospect in baseball. I mean, do you have any concerns that he's just really going to break out and that, this might, not turn out the best for you long term? Or do you think that like you're confident that he's not going to quite hit the ceiling that, Jose Ramirez has shown over the past few years?
I think he's going to be really good. It's just the problem is how much is he going to steal? And I know Ramirez is like getting up there in age, so he could probably stop stealing bases any year now. But after not being in the playoffs this year, I know I want to try really hard next year to win it all again. And Julio, he might not be up, and if he is up, he might not be an impact player for a couple of years now. And I know Ramirez will definitely be that for me.
So you mentioned not making the playoffs. I know I feel like the trends that I noticed with your team is that we saw an exodus of some of the stars this past offseason. I know Trevor Story you traded away. I know Giancarlo Stanton you traded away in the middle of last season. And it seems like you made some moves during the season, i.e. acquiring Marcell Ozuna to maybe get some of that star power back. Does this move maybe represent a shift towards trying to acquire more kind of top name bats as opposed to a strategy that, admittedly has really worked for you and just kind of streaming some of these hotter bats? Or do you think you're trying to kind of balance both of these strategies?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest problems this year, among others, like having a roto regular season, was that I had too many like high upside guys that were unproven. And I think the first couple of years I had more of those proven guys, but this year I went really into like the guys I thought could like break out, and a couple of them did, like Corbin Burns, but a lot of them also did not. So that was to my downfall. I also really thought Baez was gonna be a stud again, but I was very wrong on that.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone saw just how bad the Baez is going to be this year. I mean, I think there's room for him to bounce back, but definitely a disappointing season for him. One player that was involved in the trade that's always caught my eye was J.D. Davis. And over the past 2 seasons, he's averaged about a 370 OBP, shown some like decent power numbers, and he's got some positional flexibility, third base, in the outfield. What were your thoughts in trading him? Do you just think that, he was just kind of a necessary, like he's just a, kind of get Ramirez and you're willing to accept that? Or, was he just a guy that maybe you weren't as high on and you were just, willing to move him because of that?
Yeah, actually, the thing is, he will not have outfield eligibility next year.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
He will only be third base eligible, and with Ramirez at my third base and Gio Urshela at my corner infield, and with having 3 DH only guys for 2 spots, I didn't really have room for him. Not that I didn't like him. I like him a lot. That's why I kind of asked for the first round pick in addition to Jose Ramirez. But, yeah, that was my thought process.
Yeah, so on that, I'm going to ask the question that's been on my mind since the trade, and I'm sure it's been on everyone else's, is that Alex did send you the 8th overall pick. You now have 10 picks in this draft, 3 of which are in the first round and 9 in the first 2 rounds. Are you collecting these just kind of as a hobby, or do you really have a plan to maybe package 4 or 5 of them, or just make a bunch of smaller trades?
Well, the reason I asked for money is because I want to sell guys, and usually guys I want to sell, a lot of them are like worthless, but some of them I can get something for. And oddly enough,
for example.
Oh yeah, and some of them I do get some second round picks for. So it's not like intentional. Well, it's kind of is, but I like to pile those up, and I'm probably gonna trade at least half of my seconds. The first, I'm not sure. I may trade all 3 of them for someone, but I'm leaning towards keeping all three right now and just trying to sell some of the prospects I currently have right now to make room. But yeah, as we come closer to the draft, I'm probably going to sell some of my second-round picks this year for second-round picks next year.
Interesting. And you don't have to give away any big secrets, but are you currently in talks for any of these picks?
I have offered up the 3 firsts a couple times, but nobody – seems like a lot of people don't like kind of this draft like you. I know Zane wasn't too high on the guys in this draft, but no, I don't think I'm going to try to trade away the seconds until we get a lot closer to the draft.
Gotcha. Yeah, Alex had told us pretty much the same thing. He's a little worried, but there are a few players he likes maybe later on, but he's definitely has the same concerns that me and Zane have.
So obviously you made the big move to trade for Jose Ramirez, but you also made 2 smaller deals on Thursday. The first one was Cole Calhoun from Yuki for Ty France and Dean Kramer, and the second one was Josh Stalmount to Connor for Connor's 2021 second-round pick. I was wondering if you could go into your thought process behind the trades and how you expect Calhoun and the pick to kind of factor into your team moving forward.
Yeah, so I actually had Cole Calhoun most of the season this year, but then I originally thought it was just like a hot streak at the beginning of the season, so I cut him, but then he picked it right back up right after I cut him. So, and his overall stats were almost studly, other than his on-base percentage, but he actually got a little unlucky because he had a crazy little BABIP. But anyway, yeah, I wanted to get him back, and I also needed to trade a lot of players, and I still right now have 3 guys on my IL that I'm going to need to move in the next couple of months, or I'm going to need to move some players to take them off the IL in the next couple of months. And yeah, Yuki was interested in Ty France for a while. I know he said something about in the baseball chat, wow, that's looking pretty good for the Mariners right about now. So I was definitely willing to give him up because his supporting stats are not looking too great, even though he does have a high LBP. His hard hit rate is pretty shitty. And can I swear in here?
I mean, I don't think anyone has, but we're not gonna censor you.
Never really thought of that. Well, anyway, I was definitely willing to give him up, especially because he would have sat on my bench the whole time anyway. And he does show some promise, especially after that monster year in AAA last year. But he hasn't hit many homers so far this year. Maybe he will start hitting a lot more homers, but we'll see. And as for Dean Kramer, I picked him up right at the end of this year, and he showed some promise, but I don't know what to think of him. He still walked like 3 guys in each of his starts, I think, except for the last one, and he might have walked a few more. But yeah, I was definitely willing to give those 2 up, and glad I got Calhoun back.
And what were your thoughts on the Stalmount deal, getting the 2021 second from Connor for him?
Yeah, I was definitely wanting to get rid of Stalmount too. Not that I wouldn't have played him. I just needed to get rid of some guys, and I wanted to get rid of him specifically because he walks a lot of guys.
Yeah. Now, definitely the high walk rate, and I know pitching for the Royals, I guess, doesn't really lead itself to that many holds or saves opportunities, but, definitely an interesting young pitcher that Connor added. And I think 2, small trades that, really help your team. And, it's not always about the big moves, some of these smaller moves can really make a difference, down the road in building a championship team.
Yeah, it's about getting value for the guys that you don't really have room for.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Erik.
Yeah, thank you.
Hakuna Matata. It means no worries.
Hakuna Matata. What a wonderful phrase.
Hakuna Matata. Ain't no passing craze.
It means no worries for the rest of your days. It's our problem-free philosophy.
All right, we're here now with Alex Fischer of Hakuna Matata without Acuna. Any plans on changing that name, or is that what you're sticking with?
I kind of like it for now. I think it's kind of funny because Acuna was, I thought he was going to be one of my untouchables, and that's what I was saying before I traded him. And I really like the name too. Like I really like the Lion King, and I don't know, like Hakuna Matata. Yeah, I think I'm going to keep it for now, but I'll try to think of something.
I mean, yeah, my team for a while was named after a player I had cut, so definitely no huge rush. So yeah, big day for you Thursday night, huh?
Yeah, that was kind of came out of left field, no pun intended. Was not expecting. Like I'm trying to remember. I think Zane and I were talking about Luke Voigt, and I was discussing trades with you, Cam, and even Anthony about Max Fried. And then Zane offered us, it was like Max Scherzer, Riley Green, and a couple other pieces. And we were just kind of like, you know what? I think, well, Zach and I thought it would be good to try to get a decent or a good replacement for Fried. And obviously Scherzer's there. I mean, he's been such a great ace for the Nationals for the past 5 or so years, and we felt that we could at least get him for like another 3, hopefully 5 years. Try to extend his career as long as possible. And yeah, I don't know. We felt that the deal was sealed when he offered us Riley Green too. We're really high on him. Just hearing all the good news coming out of the Tigers organization about him. I think I watched one of the interviews with him and him just having like a really good mindset about baseball. I think he said the toughest pitch to hit in baseball is a changeup, and that right there just says that okay, he knows what types of pitches he needs to work on to get better at hitting that. At least that's kind of how we viewed it. Yeah,
growth mindset. Having that, maybe including some of those thought processes when trading for players in fantasy could be an interesting idea.
Yeah, and I think that was when we did that trade for Francisco Lindor a while back. That was kind of my thought process too. It was like I feel he's going through a tough time right now. I don't know if he's going to be like psychologically ready in the next like year or so, but obviously like he's still continuing to be good. And then Brendan Rodgers, I mean, yeah, we thought he was going to be a decent replacement too.
And you'd said that you had been talking to a bunch of teams about Fried. Was Zane the one who reached out to you about trading for him, or were you talking about other things and his name just kind of popped up organically?
Yeah, we were talking about different players. I think it started off with Luke Voigt. And it was something along the lines of like Jesus Luzardo and another piece, I think, for Luke Voigt. But then Zane brought up the point that Luke Voigt is 30, and I'm like, I had no idea. I honestly thought he was like 27 or 28. Like I was surprised to hear his age of 30, and then Zane was like, yeah, he's too old. And then it seemed like the trade talk was going to be stalled from that point. But then, then he just came up with at not necessarily random, but just that like, wow, I was not expecting you to to offer Scherzer because it seemed like he was going to be untouchable.
Yeah, I think that definitely caught us all for a surprise. EBO, I mean, I know Scherzer is one of their stalwarts, and one of the players that they seem very dead set on keeping. Obviously, with Max being a Nationals fan and Zane being a Tigers fan and a huge Scherzer fan, so definitely didn't see them moving him. But it's really crazy that you're able to pry him off their hands and that this whole trade went down. Definitely something I think that's going to shake up the complexion of the league. Unless you had anything else to add on that trade, I wanted to talk a bit about the Jose Ramirez deal, which kind of seems forgotten now, given everything that happened yesterday, but it's just as big of a trade. I was wondering if you could speak to your thought process behind that move and kind of your thoughts on that trade.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember what was our thought process. Oh yeah, so we've been trying to get Julio Rodriguez for the past year or so from Erik, and it was just a constant battle of like, no, I need this, no, I want that, from both sides. We both were like, oh, I can't do that. And then I think early on he asked for Jose Ramirez, and then we were like, we were pretty thin at third base, I think, because we only had at least starting wise, we only had Hunter Dozier, and even Hunter Dozier to begin the year was on the COVID list. So it was literally just Jose Ramirez, and now we have Ryan Mountcastle, but he was starting out in the taxi system or whatever they're calling it, on-site alternative sites. So he wasn't even starting yet, and I think that the biggest reason that played a factor in us finally trading Jose Ramirez was we felt that having Mountcastle slide in to that position, and then also Erik gave us JD Davis, and him being outfield and third base eligible, we felt that he's not going to replicate what Jose Ramirez does, but we'd be okay if he's hitting like 330, getting us 15 to 20 home runs, getting around like 50 to 60 RBIs. We felt, and then also like stolen bases too. We felt that we were okay with stolen bases. I mean, we have Jonathan Bayar, Nick Solak, even Nico Goodrum, and yeah, I don't know. And then Julio Rodriguez, I don't know. I think he's just another player that we loved his mindset. Like people are already saying he's emerging as like a possible leader in the clubhouse. I mean, the Mariners are such a young team right now too, that you could possibly be a leader of that team easily within a year or two. And that's just great to see. And just watching interviews too, he likes to keep it fun. He's just a very positive guy in the clubhouse too.
Gotcha. And yeah, we hadn't mentioned this yet, but you also gave Erik the number 8 overall pick in this upcoming draft. How did that pick end up in there? And I notice you're not in the first round anymore. Is that intentional?
Yes and no. So I really was pushing for a second rounder, but Erik was kind of dead set on the first rounder, and I felt that the first round this year, there's just a lot of question marks. I mean, we haven't seen people just getting in like even a half a season in the minors, and we also felt that it's more so we personally feel that there are a lot of good pitchers in this draft, so we felt that we could possibly get one in like the second round, because we have the 14th and 19th, so we just felt that giving up the first rounder, I mean, getting the players that we wanted, we felt it wasn't like that big of a value loss, or like we weren't giving up too much.
Yeah, if you had given him 19, that would be 6 picks in a row for him at the end of the second round.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, are there any which pitchers are you interested in, or is that something you're not at liberty to say?
One player we are interested in, I think it was, I'm trying to remember his, he's a guy out of Duke. He's a guy out of Duke. I think the Diamondbacks drafted him. Gosh, I can't remember his name. But I've just been reading about him, and it sounds like he's, again, another player who's just always wanting to improve. I mean, I think like when in his first couple seasons at Duke, his fastball was only like 88. But now it's gotten up to 96 in like over a season. And that to me is just like, that just boggles my mind how someone can go from 88 to 96 miles per hour. And I don't know if he did like the same thing as Justin Verlander, but I mean, Verlander was around touching like 90 miles per hour, but then he like increased his arm strength throughout one of the off seasons, and his fastball started to climb in velocity in miles per hour. So yet again, I mean, I just think he's just another guy that really does want to improve and get better. And he's not he's not going to accept no for an answer. Just kind of has just that great mindset that we're always looking for.
Awesome. Yeah, Bryce Jarvis is his name, 18th overall.
Bryce Jarvis. Okay. Yep. And then the White Sox pitcher too. He's interesting. Crochet. Can't remember his name either.
Garrett Crochet,
Crochet.
the one guy who managed to make it to the major leagues this year from the draft.
Yeah, he'd be a guy we'd see in the top 5. It's really hard to gauge
Honestly.
how high he's going to be drafted, and that's really going to be one of the big things I'm looking forward to.
He looked very solid, but we got to see. I know he left the game 3 of the wild card round with an injury, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because I think that would very much affect his draft value if, it's a potential longer-term injury, Tommy John or some other, arm issue. But hopefully he's healthy. It's definitely going to make for an interesting draft.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah, this was great. And yeah, do you have anything else you want to say quickly, Alex, before we go?
I just guess this draft. I mean, yeah, it's gonna be really interesting. I mean, Torkelson. I mean, I'm assuming he's gonna go number 1, but then after that, it's just, yeah, these starting pitchers. A lot of them sound good. A lot of them looked good, and yeah, I'm just really excited to see. Especially Max Myers from Minnesota, a guy who's pitching in college, like how soon he can be called up when, the Marlins team, I mean, the Marlins had a good year. So it'll be interesting to see if he'll be called up sooner rather than later. Yeah, that's about it. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. We're really glad we were able to get you on to discuss these trades. I know everyone's really interested to hear. So, yeah, this is perfect. Anything else we need to say, Cam, or should I stop the recording?
No. It was great having you, Alex, and take care.
Yep.
Yeah, you too, guys. Yeah, love the podcast too. Great job.